The year was 1992. It was May, a month of graduations and celebrations. Bradley was bummed. Tonight was the party, a huge party to celebrate the end of his senior year, and he didn't have a date. He could have had one, sure, but this was special, and any date he brought had to be special too. So he decided to go alone. Brad's father, understanding the importance of the evening's event, offered his son the opportunity to drive his brand new sports car. This was huge, as he never let Brad borrow his car. This only made Brad more disappointed that he didn't have someone to share the car with. Oh well. Before going to the party, Bradley decided to take the car for a spin around town. He couldn't let this opportunity go to waste, could he? He took a few laps through the downtown area, which was pretty quiet as everyone he knew and cared to impress was already at the party. He decided to head out to the gathering, which was at Mike's house. On his way out of town, he had to pass the town's cemetery. He always got a chill when he drove by, and today was no different. He had no choice as it was on the way. He quickly stepped on the gas to get by as quickly as he could. As soon as he passed the graveyard, he let out his breath that he didn't even realize he had been holding. About a quarter of a mile out of town, he saw something ahead. As he got closer, he realized it was a girl walking alongside the road. She was wearing a white dress. He slowed down to see if she was all right. She was walking pretty close to the road, and the sun was beginning to set. She wasn't safe. He pulled up alongside her and rolled down his window. He was kind of surprised that he didn't recognize her, as he knew everybody at school since it was a small town. Her dress was a tad odd, certainly not in fashion, but she was a cute girl who obviously needed a ride somewhere. "Are you all right? I'm heading to Mike's party. Is that where you're going?" Brad asked her. "Yes, that's where I would like to go," she answered. "What's your name? Mine is Brad," he asked. "Mine is Eve. Eve Harris." She smiled warmly at him. "Hop in," exclaimed Brad, who was now excited to not show up alone. When they walked into Mike's house, Bradley was curious that nobody seemed to know the girl. But he didn't care, so he introduced her to the crowd, and they began to dance and enjoy an evening of fun. After several hours of dancing and laughing, Brad escorted his new friend, Eve, outside and told her that he would drive her home. Eve shivered, which made Brad immediately think she was cold. He remembered that he had thrown his leather jacket into the back seat of the car because it wasn't unusual for the evenings in May to get chilly. He ran ahead, grabbed the coat, and returned to Eve and covered her bare shoulders. She thanked him and got into his car. She told him where she lived, and Brad immediately felt a shiver go down his back. It was on the edge of the cemetery. After secretly talking himself out of his fear, he opened the door for her, and they started to make their way down the road. When Brad started to turn onto the long lane of where Eve told him she lived, she immediately stopped him and told him that she could walk the rest of the way. "Don't be ridiculous," Brad told her. I'm happy to take you up to your house." "No," Eve quickly and forcefully responded. "It's a beautiful night. I would prefer to walk. Besides, I would rather not wake anyone up in my house." So Brad agreed, although he would prefer to make sure she got home safely. He really liked Eve and wanted to make a good impression in hopes of maybe taking her out again real soon. Eve and Bradley said their goodbyes, and he watched her walk into the darkness. As soon as Brad started down the road again, he realized that he failed to get his letter jacket back. Oh well, he thought with a shrug, that was one way to make sure he would see her again. He smiled to himself and drove home in a fantastic mood. The next day, Brad decided to surprise Eve at home. He would use the excuse of getting his coat back again so that he could see her and ask her if she wanted to go to the movies. He drove past the cemetery. Once again, the heebie-jeebies went through his body. He quickly came upon her lane, in which he turned into and started to drive down. He finally came upon a home that was badly in need of repair. The paint was chipping off. The shutters were either completely off or barely hanging on. 2 of the 3 front steps were missing, and the one left looked to be dangerous to walk upon. He jumped over the steps and made it to the front door. The curtain that covered the window on the door was ripped and faded. He knocked. No answer. He knocked harder. And looking through the window, he could see an elderly woman slowly making her way through the threadbare curtain. She opened the door just a crack and looked at Brad, surprised to find a young person standing there. "May I help you?" she asked in a thin voice in which he could barely hear. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am. I'm here to see Eve. Is she available?" he asked. The woman's eyes got quite large, and then they began to water up. "Is this some type of sick joke you are playing?" she asked. "I'm sorry to have upset you, ma'am. I met Eve last night. She was walking alongside the road about a quarter of a mile away. I gave her a ride to a party. I loaned her my letter jacket to wear because it was getting cold. I was hoping to get it back and to maybe talk to her." Brad answered, a little unsure as to what was happening. The older woman opened the door and invited Brad into her home. The inside was as old and in need of repair as the outside. She motioned for Brad to sit down on the rocking chair, and she took a seat on the other side of the room. "So, she's at it again, is she?" began the woman as she stared out the window. "I guess it is that time of year." Her speech slowed and trailed off. Waiting patiently, but anxious, Brad continued to watch the old woman. He suddenly got the same chill he gets when he drives by the cemetery, cold and prickly. Gosh, I guess it was 40 years ago yesterday. It doesn't seem as if it could have been that long ago. My daughter, Eve, was anxious to get to her friend's house, which was about a half a mile down the road from here. She had just gotten a new white dress to wear, and she was pretty excited. We asked her to wait until we got home so that she could borrow our one and only car. But she must have gotten anxious and started walking before we got home. About a half an hour later, after her father and I got home, we heard a knock on the door. It was the police. They had come to inform us that Eve had been hit and killed by a driver on her way to the party. Her father died of a broken heart about 6 months later. I have been alone ever since, the woman explained, continuing to stare out the front window. I have heard people talking throughout the years, talking about seeing a girl walking alongside the road in a white dress. It's always this time of year. The woman's eyes were filling up with tears. She was unable to continue. Bradley apologized to the old woman, did not know what to say to her. He got up to walk towards the door, and she followed. Before he could leave, she took hold of his hand. I'm glad to know that, thanks to you, she finally made it to the party. As Brad drove back into town, he slowed as he passed the graveyard. Is Eve in there? He asked himself. He quickly shook his head. This was all too much to process. Eve was real. He held her in his hand while they danced. He put his coat over his shoulders. What was happening? Oh, he had to get past the cemetery quickly, because he couldn't handle this anymore. As he increased his speed, something caught his eye. He screeched to a stop and jumped out of the car. After jumping the short fence that surrounded the cemetery grounds, he ran the short distance to what he had seen. There, draped over a tombstone, was his letter jacket. The name on the tombstone was Eve Harris.